This is the Truth Network.
Coming to you from an entrenched barricade deep in the heart of central North Carolina. Masculine Journey After Hours. A time to go deeper and be more transparent on the topic covered on this week's broadcast. So sit back and join us on this adventure. The Masculine Journey After Hours starts here now.
Welcome to Masculine Journey After Hours. You about caught us talking in the middle of the, between shows. We just lost track of time and we were talking and all of a sudden we heard some music playing.
Better than sleeping. We thought that was about an option with as tired as we all are.
Well, that's why we were talking.
Yeah, exactly.
So we wouldn't
Staying
fall
awake.
asleep.
That's right. Yeah.
Exactly. But we are talking about uncovering and healing the father/mother wounds in your life, you know, and yeah, obviously you can't do that alone. You have to do that through God's effort, and it's a process. You know, we love to quote Shrek around here that, you know, your wounds are like onions. You know, they have layers. And so Shrek says that ogres are like onions, right? And so, you know, you do have these wounds that you work on, and God continues to peel them back layer by layer by layer. And what I'm always surprised at, whenever I think I'm done, there's another layer. You know, and it just goes deeper, and the understanding and the relief and the restoration you get is just amazing. And so
I have a confession to make. Whenever I came to the ministry, you know, you heard I had no problem. It took me a while to realize I didn't have a wound, right? And a wound that's not acknowledged can't be healed. So that was the first step. But then it was like you guys would go on and talk about wound number 2 and 3 in a variety of ways, and they came in all these different directions. I'm like, really? Come on. Let's just get to the good stuff. Let's get to the sonship. Let's get to the new name.
Or you wanted to get to the beauty back then.
Yeah, exactly. That's true. That was the focus thing. You know. Still working on that. But, you know, I began to see that there are, I mean, really these woundings are just the things that have happened to you through life that the enemy's taken. And you know, part of the wounding talk is that the enemy will use multiple wounds and stitch them together to where you make agreements and vows and that kind of thing. And so it is better. I mean, I don't probably focus on wounds, but a lot of times, you know, you can look in your heart, you can have the check engine light, and God will surface stuff in these wounds. So it's not a one and done for sure. And I'll talk a little bit more when we're talking about wounds of, you know, kind of how they layer on too, and maybe it's attachments to the same wounds. That I have identified some just with this topic this week. So,
yeah, you know, you got to start with one,
yeah,
right, and God will take you to the one that He wants you to start with. And sometimes that's a father wound, sometimes that's a mother wound, sometimes it's a coach, sometimes it's lots of other things. Yeah, so it's just important to start. Grant,
but on the wounds you can learn by and live by.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. You know,
on a positive way, not negative.
Yeah.
Well, you're going to live by them either way, right? So if I don't let God enter in and help heal those, you know, and heal those and guide me through it, I'm going to live by them either way.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, I'm going to live on the negative side of it. You know, they say most millionaires have lost all their money multiple times before they become a millionaire. Well, if they would have listened to every time they failed, they would never get there. Right. You know, it's something about pushing through some of that, but then also learning and moving on. And we're going to get to a clip here in a second, but first I want to get to Harold and ask Harold if there was things that he wanted to share on this topic.
Well, the thing about wounds, we don't recognize the source always, but the effect is with you. And I grew up all the way through adolescence into adulthood, and the father wound that I was carrying was my dad had a problem with alcohol, and that affected me in so many ways. As I look back, I was always angry. I would lose my temper if the wind blew in the wrong direction, and I began to realize that that was the root cause of that issue. That didn't give me the right to be that way and just simply blame my father. He had his own set of issues. He had his own wounds. And if we're not careful, then we can allow those wounds that we, quote, inherit to pass on. And we can impact those who come after us in ways that we do not want and can't realize. So when I realized that my father had his own set of issues, and I began to realize that he wasn't just an evil person, he was really sick in some respects. And my relationship with him changed, fortunately, and so I went from being a teenager at points just hating my father, just wanting to get out of his life somehow, to having the last umpteen years of his life. We had a great relationship. I realized that I had had a love-hate relationship with my father all along. I got rid of the hate part, thanks to the good Lord and waking up on my part. So we need to be sensitive to other people, and if you can see something in someone that you recognize that was in you, you can help that person if you just try. So there are a lot of things about this wounding and stuff that I think is very important. Not always did I realize that, but I do now.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a saying I use about myself a lot of times, and it's too soon old, too late smart. And we need to be careful about that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you, Harold. Appreciate that. Sometimes we can know our wounds, but knowing does not always equal healing. Actually, knowing rarely equals healing. It's going to take God's intervention to help you get past that. I can understand where my wounds have come from, right? I get understanding of those, but then I need to lean into God and say, God, okay, you're the great healer. I need you to enter in here, right? And undo things I don't even know that need undone in the midst of it. But
my good friend Pastor Boyd Byerly said one time that information without application will never bring about transformation.
Yeah.
And there's so much truth in that.
Yeah. There's a lot of Asians going on there.
There is.
Yeah. No, it's good. It's good. Andy, you have the first clip of this show.
Yeah, so bear with me. This will probably be, it'll be.
We usually do. Who growled?
Who was that growling?
I think it's Harold.
Harold.
Yeah, it was Harold.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm bearing with you.
That's good, man. That's good.
Yeah.
I'm slow. Robbie would be proud. This clip is tough. I couldn't really find exactly what I want, but I knew I wanted something from the Kingdom of Heaven, because the Kingdom of Heaven is a story of Balian, young man, lost his wife. She committed suicide after losing her baby. A man comes into his life. It's actually his father. He doesn't know it at the time. And then he figures it out. And his father leaves, and then his father invites him to come on in the Crusades. And I may be getting some of this wrong. There's a lot to this story. It's pretty in-depth. But really, you have a man of significance, Godfrey. Liam Neeson character here, Orlando Bloom, is Balian, if you know those voices. But he's a good man, but he's not been a present man. So he comes into his life, and he has a lot of expectations for not really being around his son very much. He kind of imposes on all this on his son, and you'll hear it. And it's a positive thing, and it makes this son want to aspire to be this great man, but he hasn't been fathered into it. And this is kind of what I felt. My dad had some ideas and he was a good man, and he did some things wrong, but he had some good things and some good ideas. But then, they talk here about perfectness, whatever.
Yeah.
of trying to do things perfectly, and some people had kind of set that bar for him and stuff, and you end up being some of that wounding. I knew, and I've shared it many times on this show about my father wounding and how my dad disappeared in my adolescence, and it really affected me down the road, and I didn't really feel like I was a man, and God really came into that, and I see him as my father. But there's some depth to that wounds that I hadn't seen, and it was more of this thing of, have I really measured up to my father? I wasn't the son that carried a lot of the same attributes and skill sets that my dad did and stuff. But then in a lot of ways, I feel like I really was truly my father's son. But listen to the clip. I know I kind of jumped into my story beforehand, but I just wanted to show kind of how it relates and why I chose this clip.
My son, you are all that survives me. Do not disappoint me.
The king may move a man, you said. But the soul belongs to the man.
I pray the world and Jerusalem can accommodate such a rarity.
To be buried 100 yards from where I was born.
As a perfect knight.
Every man at arms, all capable of bearing them. Kneel!
Would it be so hard to marry Sibylla? Jerusalem has no need of a perfect knight. Be without fear in the face of your enemies. Be brave and upright that God may love thee. Speak the truth always, even if it leads to your death.
Speak the truth, even if it leads to your death.
Safeguard the helpless and do no wrong.
Safeguard the helpless. That is your oath.
That is your oath.
So you remember it.
Rise a knight.
Rise a knight! It has fallen to us to defend Jerusalem. What is Jerusalem worth? What is Jerusalem?
Nothing.
We defend this city, not to protect these stones, but the people living within these walls. All have claim.
Everything. Then under these terms I surrender Jerusalem.
You are your father's son.
What man is a man who does not make the world better? I have surrendered Jerusalem.
The perfect knight.
In France, a few yards of silk can make a noble. We are all of us what we do.
And if God does not love you, how could you have done all the things that you have done?
You know, all the things that I've done, how could I deny that God loves me? He's brought me from so much, but you know, you hear so much in that, and again, it's hard to get the full context in a clip like that. But you know, Jerusalem has no need of a perfect knight. And then there's another quote that says, you know, the expectation for him to be a perfect knight, and it's just all these expectations really put on him. In fact, I can remember, I don't know that I felt a lot of my dad's expectations, but he was a man that did things well. He did well in his career, and he loved me well again. But, you know, I can remember when I first got serious about God in my 20s, and I put so much pressure on all this stuff that I needed to do. I got in like 5 or 6, 7, 8, 9 ministries. I don't know how many. I was just, and I wanted to serve and do, and it was like all this pressure that he was being aligned to, or what. Oops, we got some background. But
we got some dancing music. Here we go.
All right.
Sorry about that.
That's
no
all
worries.
right.
It
No
happens.
worries.
We all have phones. That happens. But you know, there's just all these expectations, and I didn't really realize it until today, really, looking back into it. And that wound, God has come in and healed me, and the way he healed me was that he helped me see that Jesus, I think we talked about this earlier, Jesus, he said, "Thou art my beloved son in whom I'm well pleased," before he did anything in ministry. It was all about relationship. And that's the starting point. You will never do anything without that connection. But if you try doing stuff to get God's attention or his approval, that doesn't work. And same thing that we do with our fathers is try to get approval and attention. My dad carried a lot of faults, and they came through on me, you know, sexual brokenness and that kind of thing. Those things factor in. And then when I failed in my relationship, or I felt like I did with my wife and all, you know, I was like, well, you know, it happened to my dad, and I feared for kind of the life that ended up. He died, you know, without a relationship or somebody in his life. And just through all of that, God has healed me so much through this. I almost feel like I have pre-healing, because I know the answer to this, even in this deeper part of this woundedness that I experienced, because I stepped so much into being a son, but it still helps me get context for something that I wasn't even really aware of. It's like, I don't know. Hopefully you understand where I'm coming from, but whenever I stepped into the sonship, I understood that I was being accepted for who I was. But I didn't really realize how, again, there was an expectation set to live a certain life. And I wanted to do everything right and perfect. And there were times I used to talk with guys that were friends of mine. It's like, I just want to be good at one thing, really good at one thing, and I can't think of one thing I do. I think some men, other men I've talked to have had that same thought. And it gets back to, do I have what it takes? But again, God has come into that. It's just a deeper understanding of the wound, but God has come into, God as Father has really come into a lot of this. Another thing I'll talk about is my mother wound. It's a byproduct of this. My dad goes out of my life. My mom is the one that's there. And as good as my mom loved me, she's a protective mom. And, I felt like at some point, my stepdad used to think I was a mama's boy or whatever. I was always into guy things, but there was times where she wanted to say it's safe for me. A mom's going to want that. And it goes to more to state of, we need fathers. We've talked about men. Masculinity has to be bestowed by other men and not a woman. And so there was some wounding there. And I didn't like that feeling of, of being just raised by my mother. God intended it for it to be both parents. So there was wounding in that too. But through the grace of God, I've got a lot of healing in all of this. But sorry to just ramble, but there's a lot, when you start talking about and start going deeper into these wounds and getting more depth to the understanding of why you feel the way you do, how that you've carried something for a long time that has affected your day-to-day living.
So I want to ask you a follow-up question on that,
sure.
though. All right, so we said in the first show, sometimes it's hard to dig into these wounds of a father, of a mother, because it feels like you're being disrespectful, yes, or that type of thing. How do you look at your father, your mother, for anyone that's answered, differently after you've worked through some of the wounds?
Yeah, you just have a whole lot more grace. And I didn't fully understand my story. And the sad thing about it is, most of us here talking we learned more about our parents' story after they were gone, to where you couldn't go to them and say, hey, I understand what went on. Somebody else had to tell you the rest of the story, because it was probably too hurtful for my dad to tell. He told me a little bit about what his situation was with his grandfather growing up and how hard he was. And he mentioned his dad one time and said he was a coward. But then I found out from my aunt that, his dad just wasn't present in his life and could have been. And that rejection that he felt. And my dad, one thing you could say about him, he had 3 different marriages, but every one of his kids he stayed connected to and served them and didn't go away. And so that's just another way of having grace, is just seeing the positives, even though the negatives were there. You see the positives in what they actually did. So,
yeah, and going back to what you said, Andy, and I think I mentioned it a little bit earlier, didn't elaborate on it much, was the wounding seems to stem from the fact that we lose sight of or get fragmented or severed from the fact that we are our parents' child. Period. Mm-hmm. I'm the oldest son of Robert Danny and Helen Marsh. Nothing I ever did changed that, for the positive or for the negative. Nothing ever changed that. And when you look at that from a godly perspective, God adopted us through Christ. When you accept that, and He walked into the orphanage of this broken world, and He looked me in the face and said, "You're going to be my son."
That's right.
There was no performance for it. But yeah, what the enemy spins, and yes, we do things for God. Yes, we love ministry, we love all that thing. But the reality of it is, we are the beloved sons, and we are I know there's women, the beloved daughters of the Most High God. Yeah. And when you grasp that, a lot of this stuff falls away.
Yeah.
Because it no longer has a hold on you, because I'm just now understanding. I'm, almost 57 years old, that I'm the beloved son. And man, if I don't light you, fire your woods wet. I'm sorry.
Right.
But that's the reality of who we are. And, my dad's still living. I'm his beloved son. That's the thing. And I am a mama's boy. I always was, and finally became proud of it, Andy. But
me too, absolutely.
But that's the reality of us. And I can remember a couple of things that and you're right, Sam, that we think that you feel like you're talking bad about your parents. But there's some stuff that I hold on to that your dad told me a long time ago. Son, get paid for what you know, not what you do. And man, that paid off. He said, if they want to send you to school or something like that, you go. And I did that in my career, and and have done pretty well. And the other thing that he taught me was he was a good man.
Yeah.
And he lived out what he believed. Is you treat people good, and you get that back, because my dad's a nice, well-loved man. Mm-hmm. Thus, hopefully, I have become a well-loved, nice guy. So, I know. I just, but there's still time to work a little bit.
And there's a lot to what we've just talked about there.
Yeah, we covered a lot of ground.
And Danny, you're talking about identity, and identity is key. But there's more to the abundant life than understanding my identity.
Yeah.
You really need to know that. You need to know whose you are, right? That you're God's, and that you are a beloved son or daughter of the King, right? And you got to really understand that fully. But there's more to the abundant life.
Yes.
There's the healing the wounds. There's the finding your calling. There's all sorts of other pieces that Jesus is offering now that's available. And, you can make a case that this one, it sometimes seems more important than this one, but they're all important.
They are. I think they're just a matter of what you're going through in that season. And again, that's God orchestrating. It says, the steps of a righteous man are ordered in the Lord. I think that healing process and that growth process and that discipleship process are all those steps of the Lord. Mm-hmm. And we think sometimes they're random, or we're doing it. We're orchestrating it, or it's all happening by chance, but it's not the case.
No, it's not. I'm going to go ahead and play the last clip. Now, I will tell you at the beginning, I crunched it together too much, trying to get too much in, so it's kind of hard to follow.
Oh, the Andy special.
I Andified it. And so what's happening here, it's from a show called Reacher, and this guy has been forced into the mob. He doesn't want to go into the mob. He's a single father. His wife had passed away a few years before. As part of making sure he complies with the mob, they took his, at that time, teenage son, kidnapped him, cut off part of his ear, sent him back to him saying, look, worse will happen if you don't continue to do this. And so the dad is talking to the son. They've had a really horrible relationship. The son knows that the dad's in the mob, kind of thing. And where we pick it up, it's the dad walks into the son's room, and it's the dad's 50th birthday coming up, and the son had bought him a play gun that he had when he was a kid. But it's going to be kind of hard to listen to some of this, but I want you to hear as he starts talking about why he was a bad father. And so let's just pick it up.
Oh, hey, Dad. Well, I thought you were working today.
What did you put under that cloth?
Nothing. I'm just cleaning up.
Are you hiding something from me?
No.
Tell me what's under the cloth, Rich. Because from where I'm standing, it looked an awful lot like a gun. And the last thing I need right now is my son doing something stupid.
Dad, wait. It's the same kind you had when you were a kid. It got damaged here, but I fixed it. It's gonna take a day for the epoxy to fully set, but
yeah. I got it when I was 4. I'd run around the woods all day with this thing, like a real Western hero. You were like that too when you were 4. You were the happiest kid. And then after your mom died, it's like a light went out in you. You got so quiet. You just broke. I'm just realizing now that maybe that's why I've been such a bad father.
Yeah, you were. But you're not a bad man.
Ever since getting wrapped up with McCabe. I was cruel, cold, distant. I did it on purpose, Richie. You know, if losing a wonderful mother damaged you so much, you know, maybe it wouldn't be so bad losing someone like me. I know that's screwed up logic, you know, but no one gets training on how to be a dad unless you get it from your own dad, you know? I didn't. I just didn't want you to hurt after I was gone. Like you did when your mother passed. Because honestly, I never saw myself getting out of this situation alive.
Don't say that.
Instead of pushing you away, I should have pulled you closer to me. You're such a good person, Rich. You're everything that I ever wanted in a son. I'm sorry. I caused you so much hurt, but I promise you, I will never let them hurt you again.
So as I watched that, and that was originally going to be my clip, you know, that I was going to use. And if you want to go back and listen to the first show, you'll understand why that wasn't my clip. But, you know, there's perspective that when you know your father's story, as we've talked a little bit about, you know, and my dad, you know, grew up in the Depression. I came around when he was 49. I was not planned. You know, that's part of my story. My dad was a pretty tough guy at times, but when I found out what his childhood was like from my older sister, when I found out how much better he treated me than he got treated, it helped me to see him differently. It helped me to let God work through those wounds. And I'd encourage you to do that, is to continue to push into God. Go to masculinejourney.org to register for the boot camp coming up in November. It's November 20th through 23rd. Go register now. There's no reason not to. Financially, if you need some help, let us know. We'll figure out how to get you there. masculinejourney.org. This week, lean into God. Say, God, what wound are you wanting to work on me? And let him work in that. And say, God, help me to heal that. And then just let him love on you, and then love on others. We'll talk to you next week.
This is the Truth Network.